So often we will tend to box ourselves in. So I will say, I just am a shy person. And other people will often tell me, yes, Michael, you are a very shy person. And I think this, other people think this, and I come to think of it as just part of who I am, something I should love and embrace because it's just me. Well, perhaps think of it in the exact opposite way. It may be accurate to say I have become a shy person. That has nothing to do with who I am. It's sets of patterns and ruts I've fallen into that lead me to interact with others in a certain way that comes off as being very shy. If that's the case, the goal is to break these patterns, to break these ruts. In the case at hand, actively try not to do the things that lead you to seem to be, and perhaps really become, a shy person. So, you walk into a room, you feel shy, you're hesitant to talk to people. On the contrary, therefore, go and talk to people. Break out of those patterns that you usually fall into. You will realize people will begin interacting with you very differently. You will begin to develop sides of yourself that you didn't even know existed. And very soon, literally within a few months, you will look back and think, wow, I used to think I was a shy person, and now I realize actually that was a side of myself, and I've become a very different type of person within a surprisingly brief amount of time. We often like to think, I just who I am, and the world just is the world, and it's just people who are who they are, and we just try to interact well together. Well, realize that who you think you are is largely composed of the relationships that you have built up over time, many of them perhaps quite negative, and that has led you to certain types of patterns that define you. The flip side of that, however, is by altering how you interact with those around you, you truly begin to become a different person, because a lot of who we are really is based on these relationships. And as you become a different person, those around you become different people. So instead of thinking of ourselves as singular individuals interacting, think of ourselves as just based in webs of relationships. And who we are as human beings comes out of those relationships, both in a negative sense, but then if we're working on it, in a positive sense as well. So as you are growing as a human being, you're also building incomparably better relationships. That also encourages those around you, those in these relationships, to develop as well. And we can create little pockets in friends, families, and hopefully in larger social worlds where we can really flourish by these seemingly mundane acts of really learning to interact well with each other. So often we think that we should think through the big issues in life, and that's where big change really occurs. Well, some of these ideas would say, on the contrary, the types of human beings we are, the types of worlds we build, really come out of these patterns that we fall into on a daily basis. It's how we interact with people around us, how we see the world. That's where our patterns can get formed, that's where they can harden, and over the course of a lifetime, that's why we can become these very restricted creatures that will unknowingly create very dangerous futures for ourselves. By the same token, if that's the bleak side, it would also say on a daily basis, all of this could be changed. That if, on the contrary, at a daily basis, in seemingly mundane situations, you're training yourself to open up and work with the world in its complexity, that will have incredible implications down the road that you could not imagine. There's no way of knowing what sort of a person you're capable of becoming, but it's through your daily work that you can open up those possibilities. And when I mean daily work, I mean really simple, seemingly mundane things. So, you're walking to work. The way you walk to work, notice, it will usually be based upon your fears, your anxieties. I'm worried about this, I'm thinking about that. Notice how rarely one even notices the world around them. So begin training yourself to physically look around. Notice the architecture, notice the weather patterns, notice the ways people are interacting. Walk slightly different ways each time to work, noticing if you walk down this block as opposed to that block. Your perspective is slightly changed. When you walk onto a bus, use slightly different tones of voice when you talk to the bus driver, breaking out of your usual patterns of interaction. Talk in slightly different ways to the other passengers who you see on a daily basis. And you will be amazed through these seemingly mundane actions how you begin to really see the world in far more complexity. The world itself, your relationships, your interactions, suddenly you begin to really sense things around you. You begin to sense people around you. and then you keep doing that. And daily, what you're actually doing is you're training yourself to begin to sense the world around you and not simply fall into these patterns that restrict us based upon our fears, our anxieties, our worries. And as you train yourself day by day to do this, it just becomes part of your daily work in the world where you just are physically seeing more around you. You are interacting with more around you. And over time, it really allows you to become an incomparably better human being at sensing the world around you, altering the world around you for the better, building better relationships, all from these seemingly mundane ways that we do things on a very daily basis. So a very common place where we'll fall into these dangerous patterns is in our family life, simply because these are people we're dealing with on a daily basis, and pretty much as human beings, we will tend to fall into patterns with those we deal with on a daily basis, and some of these can become very dangerous. So, spouses come home from work. They've had a tough day, we usually do, things are not going well, we walk in, we're not terribly happy, we say little things to each other, sort of playing out our anger and simmering concerns from things that happened before. We fall into the sort of same kind of simmering anger that tends to fall into every day. Suddenly the children begin acting up, because of course they're kind of sensing the kind of negative simmering anger on their parents' part. In other words, a typical evening. It tends then to play out very poorly. Anger continues to grow over the course of the evening. The dinner goes horribly. The children are angry. There's a fight between the parents. Very, very typical. So, to break out of this, do little things. You walk in that door. Of course you've had a tough day. Of course you're angry that this person did this and that person did that. Of course. Nonetheless, you walk in and you use slightly different tones of voice than you would normally use. You do slightly different things. You might stop on the way home and bring something home for the family that you normally wouldn't bring home. Do little things. Simply by doing those little things, it'll bring out different actions from those around you. The normal sort of simmering anger with your spouse can be altered because you say slightly different things than usual. Do slightly different things. It brings out different sides from them. The children no longer see you as, oh, the typical angry parent coming in from a hard day at work. Rather, it's an exciting parent who's doing something different. And you bring out different sides of yourself too, because that seems exciting. You begin playing off your spouse and children's excitement at this new thing beginning to occur. And over time, as you start doing this night after night, that daily grind of just sort of the unpleasant family evening actually, on the contrary, can become incredibly exciting and incredibly innovating because you begin interacting in very different ways. And little things like that, the tones of voice, physically changing where you have the dinner, bringing something home, a nice gift home for the children that you wouldn't normally do. It is amazing if this becomes part of your daily practice, how these seemingly intractable family relationships, in a negative sense, can be altered, and over time, suddenly the family life becomes something incredibly wonderful. And in the workplace as well, we often fall into very negative patterns of interaction that restrict what we can do in the workplace, or the degree of our fulfillment in the workplace. Certainly that's equally true for our poor office mates too. Here too, little things can be changed all the time. Certainly tones of voice, also even little things like the way people are situated in an office makes a bizarrely huge amount of difference. So simply changing things like where people sit in an office, the decor of an office, where the plants are, these seemingly mundane things, it's surprising how little changes, if you really build them into the daily work of the office place, can change interactions. And once that begins occurring, then you can begin moving into the seemingly intractable parts. So you go into a meeting and the same people try to grandstand and repeat the same things all the time, preventing other people from saying anything. Well, screaming at them probably is not going to accomplish anything, but simply interacting with them differently, drawing out different sides throughout the day, will make those meetings begin to work very differently because they won't feel They need to overpower everyone around them because you've been someone that for a few days you've been talking to in different ways. You're beginning to interact with them well. They begin to have different sides of themselves being pulled out by different interactions with you. And then when you walk into that meeting, you'll begin to sense, oh, if I just use this tone of voice, that will allow me to speak a little bit more, that will calm this person down, that will enable this other person who usually gets drowned out to bring their ideas in. And it's amazing here too how these little changes over time allow us to really work with these relationships that otherwise can create a very dangerous and horrible office atmosphere. And on the contrary, with a surprisingly small amount of time, create actually a very exciting office atmosphere.